Hi, and welcome to Modern Horror. If it's not obvious by this point, I watch a lot of horror movies, and a lot of them are really good. But like any other genre of film, horror has its fair share of movies that are less than good. A majority of these are just mediocre clunkers, but a few movies go that little extra mile to be genuinely offensive. So, this movie sucks. It is an overstuffed, undramatic, ridiculous, pretentious, paint-by-numbers, cheapo plate of pasta in turd sauce. I do not like it, Sam I Am. Deliver me from Deliver Us from Evil. While loosely based on the book Where the Night by retired police officer Ralph Sarchie, the movie doesn't actually use any specific cases from the book. Instead, it invents a series of connected incidents inspired by cases from the book. The basic premise either way is that Officer Ralph Sarchie gets pulled into investigating demonic possessions and other paranormal incidents during his tenure with the New York Police Department. I don't want to front-load this, so let's get this shit show on the road. We open in Iraq mostly because The Exorcist opened in Iraq. Okay, probably not, but it could be a nice reference to the all-time classic possession movie. Really, we're here because the military is here, and we're following this group of soldiers as they enter a cave, and something.
Oh no. What is that? What the fuck is that? What the shit!
Before the narrative just whip pans to New York City some years later. Here, Ralph Sarchie is devastated over the corpse of an infant found in an alley. At night, in the cold, and the rain. I'd make another fake complaint about watching so many movies with dead kids in them, but this is just so over the top I don't want to add to the melodrama. The ME finally convinces Sarchie to give up the body, and he goes back on patrol with his partner Butler. They establish that Sarchie has some sort of violent crime-based spider sense.
You know when your radar goes off, you usually wind up with stitches?
My pet theory is that since he's the character based on the author of the source material, he actually has the mystical ability to see the railroad tracks that the plot rides on. It makes about as much sense as evil radar given the bizarre bat deductions he has to make.
Pretty fishy what happened to me on that ladder.
You mean where there's a fish, there could be a penguin?
They set off on a domestic violence call that just happens to involve one of the soldiers from the opening. They mention his name and that he was a Marine on the way, but I didn't realize it was from the Iraq sequence until way later. Back in the helmet cam clip, you can see the name Jay Tratner, and that's the connection because they call him Jimmy Tratner. If you missed it, sucks! We don't have time to point things out. Anyway, he runs and they chase him. Sarchie goes Hulk smash on the guy with a mag light. Relax, Eric. That was a long time ago. You're in a different movie now. While they're taking him back to the station, we get introduced to this Hispanic with incredible hair. While he looks over photos of some lady in a file. Something about the file upsets him and he goes to work out, and oh, dear God, he's pretty.
Man, I'm pretty.
Getting ahead of myself, this guy is Father Mendoza. Maybe he's born with it, maybe it's monotheism. He's a Jesuit priest, but he is unconventional based on his mid-run double whiskey.
Tell the shot Johnny Walker Black, please.
Moving on, we rejoin our intrepid detectives on another case of the Bronx Zoo, where some woman has thrown her son into the empty moat on the lion cage. Creeping around in the dark with night vision, there's actually some effective tension since we really don't know the nature of the threat yet, just that the power is out and all the animals are going nuts.
Good. I hate cats.
It's tell, don't show, right? They find the woman who is utterly mad. She's clawing at the dirt and muttering Doors lyrics. She is actually really unnerving just because of how insane she comes off. I also have to give special mention to the Doors because it's a nice break from typical possessed person ramblings. It's kind of nice to have break on through instead of some generic sort of, "He is coming!" crap. Unfortunately, they quickly run the whole Doors thing into the ground, bury a horse on top of it, and then beat that dead horse with another dead horse. Sarchie notices a guy in a hoodie painting the empty lion cage and tries to go talk to him to see if he saw anything, but the guy notices him and quickly runs away. He tries to chase him, and the cage quickly becomes much less empty. The zookeeper gets Sarchie behind a door just in time, but the big cats have provided a distraction and Hoodie Guy gets away. The police tote the woman off to the station, and Sarchie heads home just after sunrise. One character beat later, Reverend Silkylock shows up at the station to take Jane Crenna with him, as he is the spiritual specialist in charge of her care. The photos he was looking at earlier were in a file labeled Jane. But later in the movie, they imply that she wasn't possessed until the zoo hours before she was arrested, so why would Mendoza already be taking care of her? While finishing paperwork, Sarchi overhears two other officers talking about a complaint from a woman who says that her dead father called her and told her to shut the damn door. Clearly realizing that all mentions of doors now relate to the lyrics the crazy lady from the zoo is saying, because the doors are evil, he volunteers to handle the call. Remember what I said about being able to see the plot railroad? Is that really more of a stretch than door? The doors. Aha! The zoo! Batman ain't got shit on me!
Wait! It happened at sea. See? C for Catwoman!
I hate cats. He and Butler visit the family who claims their house is haunted. I really enjoy the touches here with candles not burning or light bulbs burning out quickly. It's like a ramped up and dramatized version of the whole electronics draining shtick from ghost hunting shows. Unfortunately, ghost hunting shows have night vision. All we have is Ralph Sarchi's dying mag light. It's like Scott Derrickson heard reviews calling Sinister too dark and then made this movie going, dark? I'll show you dark. I changed my mind. Let the light bulbs work again, please. Anyway, he stumbles through the basement and finds a rotten body that apparently the family just didn't notice. Apparently the family had hired two guys to paint their basement, and this is one of them, David Griggs. When asked to describe the other painter, all the wife can say is that he wore a hood. Based on the soundtrack and this sideways glance, Sarchi thinks that means it's Hoodie Guy from the zoo. Clearly, there's only one guy in all of New York City that wears a hood, so it must be him. I hate cats.
That exploding shark was pulling my leg.
The Joker!
Griggs' apartment is an unholy mess with bugs all over everything, and these crazy modern art collages of faces. They find a photo of him with the woman from the zoo and another of him with two other soldiers. One of the soldiers is Jimmy Tratton. Also, and I know I just harped on it, but is it really so dark here that a single mag light can only show half the frame? At this point, I think we'd be better off using a birthday candle or a lightning bug to see. Anyway, the third soldier is named Mick Santino, and Sarchi recognizes him as the Hoodie Guy. They follow the sound of chains deeper into the apartment and find a Doberman chained to a bed with a crucified, eviscerated cat. Ralph does not comment. Nothing in the scene is ever mentioned or discussed again, and it has no bearing on anything in the plot. Its only reason to exist is to throw a bunch of creepy things at the audience and go, look, it's a horror movie! I guess Griggs did it because evil?
Sweet Mary, that is sick.
In other news, character beat in 3, 2, 1.
I'm pregnant.
It's great.
And then all these fish eat this one alive. It's like drive-by narrative. Back at the police station, Father GQ is here because the zoo has finally delivered the security camera footage and he wants to watch it to see if it can help him figure out why Jane did it.
The reason she hurt a kid is because she's fucking crazy.
The prettiest padre, however, insists that the woman who just chucked a toddler into an animal cage isn't crazy, she's possessed. He also spews some crap about the highly codified nature of evil because, as we all know, evil is super organized.
Secondary evil, the evil that men do, and primary evil, which is something else entirely.
Before we can get to the video, there's a little bit of exposition to get through. Basically, the soldiers were discharged for maiming their base's chaplain. Jane Crenna was Griggs' wife and the kid was theirs. Griggs killed himself by drinking paint thinner, and then Santino wrapped him up in the tarp in the basement. Why would he do that? Because it's morbid. Let's get our movie on. It's definitely a little messed up as she stops, Santino stares at her for a minute, and then she just picks up the kid and chucks him over the railing. It's a weird little one-act play. Fast forwarding a bit to see if they can't figure out where he ran off to, they watch him play Big Cat Whisperer, and oh god damn it, double fuck you in the goat ass. That was not a jump scare. That was a shitty internet prank video that was unwelcome 12 goddamn years ago. There's no fairness or tension here, it's just, boo, I scared you, aren't I funny? It's completely indefensible. Thank you, movie.
Are you okay?
All right. Okay. Anyway, he goes back home for another character beat, and you might notice that I'm kind of glossing over a lot of these scenes of the intrepid detective's home life. That's because they have very little connection to the supernatural plot that makes up the bulk of the movie, and really only exists to bump up the stakes in the final act. His entire family is really a superfluous element that's only there to serve the protagonist's eventual rediscovery of his faith. Sarchi goes back to Tratner's apartment, but without his NYPD badge in force. In Jimmy's office, he finds a bunch of hard drives containing combat footage from Iraq, because clearly the military wouldn't have wanted to keep those. He also scrapes some paint off the wall and uncovers strange inscriptions that we've been seeing pieces of whenever Santino shows up, and then the lights go out so we can have another barely lit scene. In the dark, Sarchi and Tratner scuffle for about 10 seconds before the ex-Marine jumps out the window. Why? Well, it was startling, wasn't it? Are you noticing a trend? Back to the footage, the opening of the movie was the Marine being attacked by bats, crossing a river of human skulls, and then seeing this inscription on the wall. Sarchi gets in touch with Father GQ when they go to see Jane in the psych ward. I've got to hand it to this woman, as she is probably the only legitimately unnerving part of this whole movie. Naturally, the encounter ends with her chewing on Sarchi's arm before groaning the name Marvin, because that's clearly a reference to Sarchi's horrible secret past. When he goes to the bathroom to clean his wound, someone has scrawled a Doors quote on the mirror because the Doors are evil. Get it?
Okay, calm down. Let's go get a drink.
He and Minister Goldilocks go get drunk. And
maybe I'll put this on. It's on random.
oh god. Are you kidding me? The Doors again? You know what? Nothing happens in this scene. There's a few Doors references, they trade heavy-handed characterization, and he plays a creepy cassette tape. Oh yeah. The inscription is a doorway to possession. Can we please move along? Meanwhile, in the B-plot, the situation at Casa del Ralph is getting worse with more and more bumps in the night. This manifests as Ralph's wife, Jen, getting angry at him and blaming their daughter's fear and anxiety on the fact that he's becoming absorbed in his work and not being around at home. He goes and checks up on her, and the movie decides to try to scare us with the exact same screamer as before. Because it worked so well last time. Meanwhile, in the C-plot, Jane somehow eats a doctor and breaks out of the mental ward. I have to give this scene props for pretty good makeup and creepy staging. The makeup in this movie is generally a high point for me. It's all pretty well done and very gooey. Meanwhile, in the D-plot, or is the investigation actually the A-plot and Sarchi's personal trauma is the D-plot? And you know what? While I'm on the subject, I said that this movie was overstuffed. Here we've got Sarchi being haunted by something from his past that has something to do with children. Then there's all this stuff with Mendoza opening him up to faith and combating evil. And then there's his family relationships, which for the most part are unrelated to any of the supernatural stuff that's going on, except for what he brings home with him. And on top of all of that, Sarchi is trying to figure out who the guy from the zoo is, and he's being pulled into the supernatural stuff with Mendoza trying to figure out the inscription and why the Doors keep showing up. I think all this is a result of Bruckheimer Productions taking over from Screen Gems after both production companies had been working on adaptations of the same book independently. Screen Gems had Scott Derrickson and Paul Harris Boardman, who are officially credited with the movie, but Bruckheimer already had a script written by David Ayer, Brian Bertino, and Bruce McKenna. All those writers have worked on great stuff, but aside from Bertino, their experience was with war movies and crime dramas. And Bertino wrote The Strangers, a home invasion flick. I'm not saying that someone has to only ever work in horror to do a good job, but given the elements that show up in the movie, like starting in a war zone, focusing on soldiers, the buddy cop stuff, being structured like a procedural crime drama, later in the movie there's even a break-in and kidnapping. It feels like the wheelhouses of all 5 of these writers getting mashed together into 2 hours of movie, which just doesn't work. You can't be scary by committee. Anyway, let's kick this pig. They find Santino's address and the 3 of them go to pay him a visit. While they're waiting, GQ tries to get Sarchi to confess his deep dark secret, but they are interrupted by the mysterious Santino returning. The 2 cops try to find him in the apartment building, but the lights go out, and at this point Sarchi is so in tune with the plot that he begins to hallucinate the soundtrack.
What is it? What's wrong? You don't hear nothing.
They split up, and are you kidding me with this Pop Goes the Weasel crap? Sarchi gets taken down by Jimmy while Butler gets into a knife fight with Santino. He acquits himself well, but he can't quite cut it. Meanwhile, GQ snuck into the building and sings Jimmy a little lullaby, so he goes night-night. Well, morning butler, Sarchi confesses the traumatic past that's been haunting him this whole movie. I guess Scott Derrickson really liked working with the Super 8 camera in Sinister, so he brought it back for this flashback, even though it was only a couple of years ago. It's actually really cool. Anyway, while he was still a beat cop, the Force was hunting a child murderer. While out with his family, he recognized the man near a crime scene and punched him into a bloody pulp.
I absolve you from your sins.
Absolved of his sin of punching the life out of a dude, Sarchi is now ready for the finale. Quick diversion to Ralph's house so Santino can go and kidnap his daughter. I want to take an aside here to mention that means Ralph spent the night with his new priestly friend. Jane makes the most of her new freedom by jumping off a building and landing on Ralph's car. He calls it in and then gets a call from his wife, who's been replaced by a possessed antagonist while he was away.
Me who made a jump. Santino.
He runs home and arrives with police backup to arrest Santino. Now it's time for the final confrontation between our newly minted warrior of God and Satan's portal painter. The Battle Royale. Reverend Silkylocks, the rules!
There are 6 stages to exorcism. Presence, pretense, breakpoint, voice, clash, and expulsion.
Giving stages like this is a nice variant from the stock film exorcism where you get a young priest and an old priest, then spend a couple minutes asking the possessed their name before reciting a couple of random prayers and then letting the demons know that Christ wants them to check out of the Motel 6. 6. Anyway, what they lay out on the movie is absolute crap and doesn't even remotely resemble any modern rite of exorcism, but it certainly is dramatic. Where I really lose it is that right after laying out all these stages, they start the exorcism and it goes exactly as planned. A minute or two at each stage with no real hang-ups. Yeah, they do the exorcism thing where the demon brings up the priest's secret shame and it flusters him, but only for like 10 seconds, and then he goes, "Nope, your mom's a hooker," and doubles down on the Hail Marys. Don't get me wrong, it's really pretty epic to watch, and it has a good soundtrack that for once isn't the Doors. Okay, forget what I just said. It's just so paint by numbers and has no dramatic tension and accomplishes nothing except to check all the boxes. Since all the procedural cop stuff is done, they have to wrap up the supernatural story, so they do that. Sarchi finds his wife and daughter and religion, and they all live happily ever after.
I do renounce him. All his works and all his ways. I renounce all evil.
So, few things disappoint me more than when a movie misses its potential, and I feel like this one really had it. With Bruckheimer on board, they had a budget like 10 times more than Derrickson had with Sinister, which is way more than horror movies usually get. Plus, they reunited the writing team of Scott Derrickson and Paul Harris Boardman, who've proven capable of writing excellent dramatic horror about demonic possession. They had so many unique and interesting situations, each of which probably deserved its own movie. They could have made a possession movie set in Iraq. That would have been pretty novel. Or how about a possession movie about returning soldiers desperately trying to save their souls? I mean, how's that for a PTSD allegory? Or what about a movie just about a New York City police officer dealing with his own inner darkness while running into the unexpected on cases, without the soldiers or overarching plot? Any of these could have been a great movie, but instead we got all of them at once, so nothing really has a chance to shine, and it just feels so contrived, jumping from plot point to plot point. Plus, there's so much going on that nothing actually has a chance to be scary. So much of great horror is just sitting and letting the reality or unreality of a situation sink in. And this movie doesn't have any time to do it because it has so much stuff it has to get through. So instead of something great, we get Exorcist Batman versus the out-of-tune Jack-in-the-Box. But that is way more than enough about this movie. Thanks for checking out some modern horror. Subscribe below, and I'll see you again next time. Play it out, Jim.
Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey